So here we are again. We're on a further UBI podcast, and we're looking at what universal basic income means to people in Wales. And it's really great to be joined in this podcast by Matthew Dixon. Welcome, Matthew. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Matthew, my first question to you is, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, what your role is, what your situation is? Just tell us about that.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm married, father of two, living in Cardiff. I'm the only wage earner in my house in terms of a major wage. We decided that actually my wife wouldn't go back to work after our second because costs of childcare for little ones are just so crippling these days. So yeah, so we got a small income coming in from my wife, and I work in the financial sector, and yeah, that's sort of basic thing about me.
Thank you. Okay, and tell us what you feel about universal basic income, and would it make a difference to your life?
What I think about universal basic income is I think it's really worth trying. It's quite a radical idea, and I know that there have been some other countries, like I think Finland has trialed it. I've not seen anything on what the sort of outcome of that was, but I think it's something that's well worth a try. As to what difference it would make on my personal life, I'm not sure how much of an impact it would make. I'm obviously well aware that, as I'm sure voters would be, that anything like this has to be funded somehow. And given I'm sort of a middling wage earner, it might be that I don't particularly get a benefit out of it. I think the benefit would more be felt by those who aren't as fortunate as myself. And I think those are the people we need to be really looking out for.
Thank you.
So yeah, no, go ahead.
So why do you support universal basic income? You touched on it a bit at the end, but can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two reasons. First of all, very strongly supporting the fact that we need to support those who are less fortunate, those that are struggling. We need to make sure that there is that safety net that everyone can rely on. So the idea that everyone's basic needs are met, I think is a very important one. The other one, and this is something I've been seeing more and more in the workplace, is the rise of automation. And this is a very big issue that we need to tackle head on, which is the simple fact that we're able to get computers and robots to do so much now that we don't need as many people working. And as these robots get better and better, the number of jobs that are going to be needed out there is less and less. We've got this problem with the ever increase of house prices. So families are needing two incomes so often to survive. And on the flip side of that, we don't need two people from every household to be out at work. So somehow we've got to sort of solve this problem, or otherwise it's going to be a serious problem in the future.
You say your wife didn't go back to work because of the childcare. And I just wonder what you think, how universal basic income could fit into that. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it would give much more of an opportunity for whichever one of a couple, it doesn't need to be the wife, it could be the husband, to actually spend more time at home in those early years looking after children and not feel that they've got to go back to work. I mean, obviously a lot of people want to go back to work, but they shouldn't feel you've got to. I mean, if we were sort of looking very much touch and go of, well, can we afford to survive on just one income? Well, just about. But on the flip side, we couldn't necessarily afford to have two incomes and have full-time childcare for one child and wraparound childcare for a second. So yeah, I think that having universal basic income will help us get back to a situation where someone can do full-time childcare, potentially do some voluntary work as well, and it'll increase the scope of that sort of thing happening.
Thank you. And I've got one final question, which is about Wales. Do you think that universal basic income would make a difference across Wales? Would it do anything for Wales as a country? Any thoughts?
It would make us trailblazers. We would be it's not something that I've particularly heard coming out of voices in Westminster or in Holyrood or anywhere. So yeah, I think if we would be noticed for trying it, and yeah, and I think also it could be a very good leveler. It could help bring up some of those areas, some of the poorer parts of Wales, to be in a better state than maybe they are at present.
Thank you. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us for this UBI podcast and for giving us your views on universal basic income. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
That's great. Diolch yn fawr.